High five. Very cool.
You're listening to Season 2, Episode 2 of Speak Easy with Haroon, conversations with creatives, artists and troublemakers. And if you're tuning into Metaforest's platform, then you're tuning into Season 1, Episode 2 of the Metaforecast.
Yep, Season 1, Episode 2, and it's going to be a special one today. Haroon, do you want to introduce this guest today? Because
Yeah, so I've been waiting a long time to be able to get this person into the studio and have a chat with them. A very, very talented writer and poet, hailing from West London. Who...
I had to.
You had to get territorial there, Mr. Forrest.
I feel like I'm the only one, but yeah, go on.
So she has put out 2 incredible books of poetry in the last several years. First, her debut collection, Impressions, and then the follow-up, For the Moment. It's Charnjit Gill.
Hey, Charney, how are you?
Hello. I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
It's a pleasure. Like Haroon said, you've put out 2 books that's incredibly not only difficult, but a lot of time it takes a lot of time to write 2 books and literally back to back, because you dropped Impressions in 2021, I believe, or 2020.
2020, September 2020.
So
Yeah,
it's a pandemic baby.
it's a pandemic baby. That's my pandemic baby, 100%.
And then For the Moment, which was 2022.
Yeah, 2022.
So yeah, that's a lot of poems. 2 collections.
Yeah, probably close to 150 to 160 poems that you sort of published in that period in books, and that's not counting the fact that in the past I think you've also been published in sort of poetry journals and publications.
Poetry journals, like magazines, but that would be like the odd one here and there. Before I published Impression, I really wanted to have like a whole body of work where it's, based on 1 or 3 themes, that kind of thing.
So in terms of the books, because obviously you've got 2 books, 2 collections, and I know how the first one is kind of sectioned into different kind of motifs or themes or moods, and then the second one is more kind of like a run through with kind of just I'm not sure if it's intentionally supposed to be some sort of journey where one poem leads into the next.
It's just one big marathon.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is you didn't even give us a contents page for the second book.
Yeah.
You just went straight into it.
Yeah.
Was that a conscious thing?
No, I had thought when I'd published Impression, the contents page and everything else like that, the publisher had already kind of organised, so I'd assumed the same for the second one, and it hadn't happened. But it's okay. I kind of think I prefer it for it to not have a contents page. But I know from feedback from other people, they've said it would be quite nice to be able to be like, oh yeah, this is the poem that I read and this is the page that it's on. So maybe for the next one.
Oh, maybe, yeah. I mean, are you already planning a third one?
I'm thinking about it.
Oh, wow.
So we've had this private conversation, me and Charnjit, where I have consistently been jabbing her, and I will continue to jab her to put a 3rd book out. But at the same time, I've got to be very careful because she's the editor for my first collection I'm hoping to put out this year. And I'm behind on delivery of certain things that were promised to her. So, yeah, I will jab, but very carefully.
I mean, it's just this time round, I'm working on a couple of different creative projects at the same time. So obviously I'm helping to edit your book, as well as doing lots of other things as well. So it's not that it's not on the agenda, it's just a little bit further down on the agenda.
Yeah, well, Impressions was like one of my favourite books I read in 2021. And obviously it made a big impression. What was kind of like the idea behind Impressions, and how did you come up with the title?
It's kind of 2 parts to that.
Okay.
So it's me kind of thinking about the impact that you would leave on the world.
Mm.
So it's kind of like how you see things. In terms of the actual title, the title's probably the last thing that I came up with. So after all of the poems have been edited, like written, edited, ordered, that was the last thing that I come up with. But it was, I can't even remember what song it was, but I was listening to a song and that particular word impression really stuck out to me, and I thought actually that would be perfect for the title of the book.
Well, I was going to ask what song it was.
I can't remember. Genuinely
It's a pivotal, important song, and
yeah.
We don't have the reference for it. That's actually cool. And how soon after finishing Impressions did you start creating content for the moment? Did you take a break, or did you have like some leftover from Impressions that just didn't make it into the book?
I think I definitely took a break.
Okay.
Obviously writing and editing and, you know, obviously promoting the book, going out to sell it, that kind of thing is very time consuming. And when I'd got to kind of the last few, I was kind of like, I think I'm in a different headspace. And obviously my editor as well was kind of like, we're quite keen to work with you again. So it was very much kind of being prompted as well as mentally thinking at the back of my head, yeah, I'd love to do another one. So yeah, it has to feel like the first one's come to a kind of natural close in order for you to have the headspace to do the second one.
But how do you know you're in that place where that journey or arc has sort of come to the point where it's time to move on and create something new?
I don't know, you just have a feeling, like a sense of closure, and you have a certain level of excitement to work on something new, to just do a completely different project. And I quite like having the discipline of being like, okay, if you know that you're writing a book, you know you're putting a collection together, you know you're either consciously writing poems for it or editing ones that you have that already exist that need to kind of to be brought up to scratch. And I think when you're working on a bigger project, it really, really helps because you've got that drive and that focus of like, this is the thing that I'm doing.
I want to talk about, I don't know if you want to go into this, like your journey into poetry. Like, have you always been writing, and what made you want to go into, you know, open mics and then showcasing your written work to a bunch of strangers, essentially?
I think writing for me has been, it's definitely took me a while to find my voice. And what I mean by that is, although I've been writing since I was young, where it wasn't until like I went into uni, I did English literature and creative writing at uni.
Same.
So you know what I mean, right? You're kind of forced to write in all of these different forms, but you have to find ones that you feel a little bit more natural to you. So even though I was writing fiction, the kind of feedback that I would get from my lecturers would be that, you know, you write very poetically. And although I'd written, you know, for my masters, I did a non-fiction project. Where I looked at kind of spirituality and Sikhism, but I had been writing poetry kind of not on the D-low, but just something as like a side hustle thing, but I never did anything with it. I just write loads, and then it would just kind of sit there. And one of my lecturers suggested saying, well, why don't, like, as a group, we go to an open mic night, and the pieces that you guys have written, whether that be fiction, non-fiction or poetry, you just come and perform, because it's also you learning how to make use of your work. And I felt like you're not doing yourself any justice by it sitting in the bottom drawer. So it kind of made sense to be like, okay, I've written this piece of work, might as well go out and share it with people. And sometimes sharing it with strangers can actually be nicer because they don't know you, and if they don't see you again, it's not the end of the world. Whereas actually sometimes performing in front of your peers can be more difficult.
Have you performed poetry in front of people you know, like friends, family?
Yeah.
Things like that. How did that go? Like,
I mean, it's just because they know you on a different level. They're perceiving or judging you in a slightly different way.
Okay.
Whereas a stranger who, let's say for example, if they've never seen a poet before, they're going in really, really open-minded, quite blind, which is lovely. But then you have a certain thing of like, if that's the first person if you're the first person they're going to see, you want to make sure they leave with a really good impression of like, oh, okay, I didn't know poetry could be like that.
Yeah.
And you want to walk away from this idea of poetry being really dead and something taught in a classroom, very textbook style, rather than it being like spoken word is very lively and a completely different atmosphere.
What I really love about your style is that you have this economy with words, and me being someone that is familiar with poetic forms as well, I appreciate just being concise and not having any surplus of meaningless syllables or sounds or words. And I just wanted to know, like, where did that come from, or is that something you intentionally do as part of your style or your writing style?
I mean, I don't sit with the intention of thinking I want to write a really long poem or I want to write a really short poem. I want to write. However long or however it comes out is what feels kind of natural, and then to edit it to kind of get it to really hone in on what you're trying to say. Once you've kind of left it at that is how you leave it.
But the thing is having sort of read your work, like, it's very rare for a poem to sort of bleed onto a second page.
Yeah.
So it is quite interesting because I find that with Charnjit's work, there's a contrast, especially when we go into, say, spoken word in the open mic scene, where people are doing poems that sometimes people struggle to stay within a 5-minute limit, believe it or not, on open mics for one poem, and the poem goes on and on and on.
I don't have that problem.
No, I know you don't have that problem.
I mean, I don't think both of you
If anything, my problem is that, I have in a 4-minute slot where most people would perform one, I have lots of shorter ones. But I feel like in each individual one of those poems, it kind of says what it needs to say, and we're not going to sit there and add loads of stuff to it when it doesn't add value.
That's true. This is what I feel about short form poetry, especially with like haikus, which everyone knows I'm kind of a champion for. Like,
100%.
I think there's something just ineffable about a short form poem, where if you're able to remember the poem in its entirety, and obviously shorter poems are easier to remember, it stays with you longer, and you could be doing something like 5 years down the road, and then that poem might just pop in your head because you can remember it. And that's something that I kind of gravitate to in terms of just being concise with words, just getting to the point, and just saying so much with so little. You can spend days or hours deciphering lines that are only like maybe 10 or 12 lines, like a sonnet, rather than pages of an epic.
But for me, it's not even about attention spans with writing. It's I find people don't read these days as well, and that's due to social media kind of like formatting this new generation's brains to like have shorter attention spans. Maybe. True, but then people still binge watch TV shows for 12 hours.
I think it's
the
more
thing
passive,
is it's about what can hold your attention.
This is what I was trying to drive towards, which is, for me, there are people who've done longer poems. So, for example, you'll see someone on stage, say, someone we've actually had on the podcast before, and I think we're going to have on again soon, a poet called...
Are you going to say the name? Because I know it's your names. You don't say names usually by Conan's.
No, it's Jodie. No, but Jodie's someone who can fill in a 5-minute slot with one poem. And, that audience, that young audience that you're sort of... You're right. There is an attention span issue where their attention span has been sort of influenced and formatted by social media and technology. But I will go to an open mic and I'll watch those very same people be captivated for 5 minutes by Jodie or other poets of that caliber. So for me, it's, I've read sonnets and haikus that are really dull. I've read others that literally have, I've had goosebumps. So I think for me, regardless of length and form, if something is really captivating and it's holding your attention, then it's always going to get you. But I found it quite interesting that you're saying that basically you don't go with the intention of making a short or a long poem, you just say what needs to be sort of said.
Yeah. And if it turns out to be 2 pages, then it's 2 pages. If it turns out to be 5 lines, then it's 5 lines. But as long as it feels like it's expressed everything that I want it to say, it's fine.
And what's your writing process like, Charnjit? Like, do you sit there going, okay, I'm really interested in exploring this theme because I haven't explored it before? Do you sometimes just in that place where there's something inside of you, got to get it out? Is it free writes? Do you do a lot of rewriting, redrafting and editing?
I guess it's a mixture of kind of everything. When I'm doing, there have been occasions where I've been really inspired by something, and if it becomes a topic that is, I'll have to do a lot of research on, I'll do a lot of research into it. That will form kind of the content of the poem. There's other pieces.
What does research look like for a poet who writes? Because obviously we have these probably, romanticized ideas of, artists and poets that it's just, the muse just literally brushes by them like a little like a little thud on the head, tap on the head, and like boom, it just, it bleeds straight out of your pen. Yeah. So can you talk to me about what research looks like potentially for you?
I mean, it depends on what the content of the poem is about. So there's been occasions where I've done, like, just off the top of my head, I did a poem on Grenfell. I'd have to do a lot of research into it because I'd want to think about what details and descriptions or what is the kind of message that I'm saying. So when it's kind of political things or things that are kind of happening in the news that I want to touch on, that was for a fundraising event. So something like that. Whereas there'll be other things that I have an idea or I'm really moved by something. I've been thinking about something a lot, or I've been feeling something a lot, and I think actually I want to get that off my chest. And in terms of the nitty gritty of what that actually looks like, is, and every poet I'm sure can vouch for this, is you have your notes section in your phone, and the idea is jotted down. And then at some point I'll revisit it and it will kind of turn into something. I'll write something out for it. I'll edit it. If it turns into spoken word, it turns into spoken word. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It just stays as a poem. Sometimes I have certain poems where the entirety of its poem, word for word, line for line, could hit me at like 3:00 in the morning and I'll write the whole thing out.
There's a poem in your book where there's a line that says success in its own time. What does success mean to you?
Success means to me, I think success is an evolving concept. At different ages, at different stages of your life, success means different things. From an overall general point of view, I would say that it is the intention that which you set out to do something. If that is achieved, whether that be how you envisage it or whatever it is, if that is the kind of thing that you've wanted to do and you've been able to do it, that would be success. There's other byproducts of that I think you wouldn't necessarily consider, which is, there could be things like how satisfied you are with something. Do you find whatever it is that you're doing, do you find it, do you enjoy doing it? And I think timing plays a massive part in that, and I think that's always the underrated thing. Yes, there's hard work, yes, there's talent, yes, there's everything else, but it's also an element of like certain things aligning in order for to make something happen.
What does success look for you right now? Like how has it changed over the years for you? Because you say that it evolves and it's almost like a moving target.
Yeah.
But let's say, so again, we talked earlier about you getting into poetry around about the time you were at university when you were studying English literature. how long ago was that, and like what at that time did you think success looked like? And sort of, especially I think post pandemic, where I think a lot of people have had to just reevaluate life, change their goalposts, and a lot of people have, yeah, just there's been a lot of change. I'm just curious to know what success may have looked like for you, because you know what you've talked about. You're talking about it in a sort of abstract way, but
Yeah.
I really am interested in what how it may have looked to you, or how you would have defined it when you first started out writing and setting out on this path, and what does it look like more recently?
I think when I first started writing, the kind of what success looked like at that time, or how what I thought it would be, was if you could get your work published, that is a win. So I think those kind of initial points of luckily having certain poems accepted by specific magazines or poetry journals, that kind of thing, that was success at that time. I've also had the experience of being made redundant twice, so that feels very much like a failure, and it takes a long time for you to be able to you do have to have that stop and rethink of what am I defining success. And I realised that success, I had attached a lot of my personal value onto the role that I was doing, and forgetting that I'm a whole person outside of that job that I do and the organisation that I'm part of. There's so many other things that I am as a person, so I don't derive as much value from that. But then also took me like a year and a half to find a job, and then to get that felt like success at that time. Getting the job, doing it, all of that kind of thing, that felt like a success at that time. Sometimes the happiness part can seem a little bit like a privilege when you're running on not survival mode, but an element of like, let's just get this in, and that kind of stuff can come later. Now I'm very much of the belief that you have to be, especially if you're going to be doing it for a longer period of time, it has to be something that is fulfilling you in some way, and that you do get a sense of joy out of. It doesn't necessarily have to be from monetary value. It can be because of the freedom it allows you to do in other things. So sure. It does change over time. Then after I've been published a few times, and I think at that point success looks like having a full body of work together. Success then at a different time could be, when I first started open micing, getting through your first poem without shaking, or you each time you feel like a different version of you is becoming more confident, or your delivery is getting better, you feel a little bit more comfortable on stage, different things like that. Once you're kind of a little bit more experienced doing open mics, you feel success then looks like doing headlines or features. At different points. Now I'm in a place where I feel like I've been incredibly lucky that I've been able to do lots of things. So sometimes just getting the book published is kind of a win, regardless of how many people buy it, because otherwise that becomes another unit of measurement. But then the wider concept of that is having an impact on people. If people read it and hated it, that's not really what my intention is. I would like to think that someone would read it and take something away from it. Success for 2023, what it looks like now, I would say is, I don't know, just all of the things that I want to do, being able to do them and at a level that I'm happy with. And the kind of the fallout of that can be what it will be.
I've got a question, obviously, because we're talking about success, but in terms of, like, having spent so much time in the scene and then seeing successes, but have you overcome any obstacles or challenges in your time?
I think challenges for me have been, I guess, it's been different challenges at different times, if that makes sense. When I first started out, it would be writing, obviously initially writing something that you'd feel like, yeah, I could share that with people, writing it to a higher standard, or editing it a lot, that kind of thing. Then it would be like delivery, presence on stage. Yeah, and then just, you know, you're constantly overcoming different obstacles, ones that you didn't necessarily thought you would be. You'd spend your whole time thinking, I need to make sure I'm being engaged. Like, there's been times where I'd go on stage and think, okay, I really want to, like, before the night, I'd be like, okay, I really want to improve my delivery. I'm being really engaged with the audience, but I know I've mentally missed 2 lines, or I've switched things, or, you know, something else has happened.
Yeah.
And you're just like, you know, you're dealing with a whole different set of problems. So it just depends.
Yeah, I've had similar challenges in that, like, you know, I'm performing, but I've messed up 2 lines, but I'm trying not to let the audience know that I've messed up.
Yeah,
because they don't know the poem.
They don't know, and you know, it is only once you've done it enough times and you start thinking that way, you think actually it's not that big a deal. But it's like your first few fumbles at the time feel like you've died on stage. But obviously, the more you do it, the less kind of it's not as painful every time you do it. I'd like to think it gets a bit easier, but you know, everyone's experience is different.
So there's one piece in your book, and I'm going to butcher your poem, but it's to do with a dawning time.
Yeah.
That piece kind of, and I actually just messaged you as soon as I read it, because it struck something within me. I just wanted people at home to kind of know what you were trying to communicate in that. So I think the poem was called Decorate. Shani, could you read from it for the audience, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so this one's called Decorate. Life is an ambitious piece of art, a moving performance, a real work of fiction. It's a blank canvas of characters where the plot pulls in. It's a technicolor film, a lulling piece of music. Art is how we decorate space, music is how we decorate time, and love is how we decorate life.
How can you not click to that? Amazing, right?
I'm exhaling right now.
For the moment, now available on Amazon. And if you come to a poetry event, you can get Shani to sign you a copy. So yeah, music is how we...
music is how we decorate time.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
I'll agree. As someone who's a massive music fan.
And just even the concept of art decorating space, like it's obvious, but it's like it's deep, you know.
But again, this is a great example of these are such compact lines. I'm so used to.
Yeah.
To be honest, not even in poetry and everything, even in other forms of like communication, people taking so long
to get to the point.
To say something, and like.
You execute it in 3 lines.
You say it in less than sort of 12 words, and it feels so effortless.
Thank you. It's not. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard work.
Are you sitting there like trying to craft a line and re-edit it, or do you sometimes just certain things fall out of your head and you're like, oh, I've got to jot that down?
Yeah,
fast.
literally like that.
Which one?
As in like some of them, the purity of it. If it comes out exactly like that, I won't touch it. And there are certain poems that I do give it that level of sanctity, because I'm like, if I edit it, I will mess it up and it will be worse than what the original should be. So it's better to kind of leave it in its purest form.
I like what you said there. You said you leave it in its sanctity.
Yeah.
Like, I actually understand that there's poems that just come out effortlessly.
Yeah.
Like Corinne said, just being brushed by a muse, where like you're just being the outlet or conduit for something greater, and that seems almost divine. Like those last.
It never I can relate to what you're saying, because you look at it and you're like,
if I touch this, I'm
like,
fucking it up.
but also you're like, it came from me, but it's not me.
Yeah, it's like it's
you're
so
the conduit.
Good. Yeah, you're the conduit. You're channeling like something higher. And
you always got to be the vessel. Yeah, you always got to be the vessel.
For sure, like those words filled fill so much space with so little words. Like, it's amazing. Sorry, it was one of those poems that I just had to let everyone know about.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah. Because have you finished the book? You finished it.
I've read.
I put him on the spot by now. You better have finished it, Haroon.
2/3 of it,
Okay.
and it's been.
It's near the tail end of the poem.
What I'm going to say is that I don't think I've read a poetry book this fast. In that it's just one of the most frictionless reads I've come across in a while. That's
agree.
for the moment.
I agree. Like, I remember reading Impressions, and I remember reading For the Moment. Impressions was very special because I think it was like one of, like, I think I read like maybe 5 books in 2021, and Impressions just had a certain magic over me. And For the Moment, like you said, frictionless. Like, I read that book as well as a couple other poetry books within the Christmas period.
But what struck me about For the Moment particularly, it's like you were sharing insights and lessons. And there is definitely a wisdom that I feel is beyond your years.
I get that a lot.
So,
but thank you for saying
where
that.
Where does that come from? Are you someone who just naturally reflects a lot, or have there just been certain experiences or inflection points growing up?
I think insights and lessons is probably the best way to describe it. When I'd first started writing For the Moment, it wasn't done that intentionally. But then when I was discussing it with my editor, but he's like, it does kind of feel like that. So why not just kind of roll with it? It seems that's the more natural thing. And I guess it was just me putting together, I guess, a series of poems that was just like, it's kind of like me saying, here's a load of stuff that I've learned. It is applicable to lots of different areas of your life. Here you go, guys. See what you can. Hopefully, you can take something away from it, and hopefully, you can apply something to it in your own life.
I did. I think offline before we started talking here today, I've sort of communicated to you that quite a lot of the stuff that I was reading, it was stuff that I needed to, like, I needed that. I needed to hear that, or to be made to think about those things. So I can definitely see this as a book that, for your second collection For the Moment, as something that I'll probably be returning to again and again.
That's very nice of you to say. Thank you. I've had feedback from other readers that have said that they almost use it as like an affirmation, and it's like sometimes I'm of the belief that it's like in terms of the impact that you want to have, reading it once from someone is lovely, but to have a book that you constantly return to me, that's a bigger impact, because it's like at different points you can pick it up, and depending on kind of where your headspace is at, you take things in differently.
I was actually going to say, like, I'm just thinking about the title. Like, it's a genius title because For the Moment is quite ironic in that it's moment.
It's momentary. It's temporary.
Like a temporary short piece of time, but like
there's a timelessness and a universality to some of the things here. So when you talk about
forever.
Other readers and fans saying that they use it as affirmations, I was just nodding my head like, I see that. And
you can return, like you said, you can return back to it. And even though it's For the Moment, what's in here is, like you said, timeless. There's bits that, there's definitely something that someone can take from all walks of life and incorporate into an affirmation or some sort of philosophy to live by, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I think an element of it is written with that intention. It's this kind of philosophy. Here's some stuff that I've been through or that I've learned, and I want the readers to walk away from that quite easily, to be say, okay, so when I'm in this kind of situation, this is the kind of mindset, this is the kind of thinking, this is what I can, hopefully this can be moved to feel, so I can do whatever I need to do.
I've got one more question. I don't know how about you, Haroon.
You go for yours.
So there's this one piece, playing cards.
Yeah.
And I think it wasn't until maybe your
Classic.
headline that
This was a moment. by
yeah,
the way.
it was a moment, and I think you literally blew everyone out of the water mentally, just like what the hell is happening. I was gonna say the F word there. What the hell is happening? I don't know what I'm seeing right now, but like it's just what. How wait? One, how did you write that piece?
Yeah.
Two, how did you go about thinking? Oh, this is how I'm going to perform it. And then
If
three,
you
like
can, for those who, because obviously
Yeah.
we've got people here listening who don't have the context, if you guys can sort of go into a bit of what happened with that piece, because it's the writing is brilliant, but I think the way you performed it, if you want to talk about it, Meta, because it's.
I mean, I wasn't even there, and I
Oh,
felt
yeah,
the
you were.
shockwaves.
So
Yeah,
what?
I'll
so,
let
so,
Haroon
so
go
what
with
it
it.
was so.
The
for those-
interesting
for the-
thing is you're behind me, and I think he was because he was
Haroon's the
DJing.
DJ.
Haroon was the DJ. He was behind me, so he saw the best of both worlds. So he's seeing.
But I
you can
wasn't
see,
just there. Because
you're
what happened
not
was
just
I
there.
actually went around the side. I was like,
Yeah.
you know what? Because the thing is, for, again, for those who are listening who don't have context, I am also a DJ at one of the
BYOB.
events, BYOB, Bring Your Own Bars in London. And so a lot of the time I'm behind the booth and I'm behind the performer. And with Charney, typically like up until this particular headline performance that she did, which it just took her into another league of poets. She would go and she would read, from her book, and she would knock us dead. This time around, she memorized her poems, and that was like the first sign of okay, Charney's come and she's looking to give us something else. And there was a poem which had a whole bunch of metaphors around a deck of cards. And then you actually brought a deck of cards. You brought the props. You had to set up the stage in a certain way. We had a couple of box tables put up.
Yeah.
And you were literally, as you were reciting these lines, you were pulling these different cards. And the crowd was going nuts. And it was a moment. So just to give that context to visualize for those who are listening right now who would not have been here, this is what Metaforecast is referring to. There was just this next level of thought and care that Charnjit put into it. It wasn't just, her words have always been incredible, but to actually come up and to really think through a performance with props, with visuals. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So, the poem I originally wrote. So I run a creative writing club at school. So we had a session with the kids where everybody brought in really random objects, and that was the kind of premise for whatever your writing is about. I have students that write fiction, non-fiction. I stuck to poetry because, that's me. So I had a 10 of hearts, which is obviously the beginning of the poem. And I thought it'd be quite an interesting idea to embody what that is and tell a story, a narrative in and around that. Mm-hmm. So I'd written, let's say, the first half of it-ish when we were in that session. And when I revisited it, I thought, actually, that was one of those poems that actually I did a lot of research for. Research being what all the kind of games that you play, like what are all the different games that you would play with cards. And I'm thinking, solitaire, poker, all of these other ones. And I'm trying to think of concepts or ideas of, what does the value of this card mean? What can it relate to? Those kind of things. And also on a broader scale, music as well. How is cards used in music? What references do they make? That kind of thing. So it's kind of doing research on both and then joining them all together to create the whole poem of playing cards. The idea to use props, I hadn't originally, but then I thought it would be quite different to do something like that. I haven't seen anyone use props like that on the open mic scene, and I thought it'd be quite different. And I think in terms of like memorizing and stuff for the headline, I've tried to memorize stuff for for open mics before, and I haven't been as successful. I was very lucky that I managed to get through that many. But it also just aids with memory because I have the cards as a visual reminder of what that line is. and doing it in that order, I just thought it just brought a, you know, as you guys said, like a different level to it. And I've never done anything like that before, and it was really, really fun to write, to research, and just so much more fun to perform.
Did you know what you did when you did it? Like when you everyone's reaction. Like I edited a video of that set, and everyone is just like the applause and the crowd went crazy. Like, were you aware at the time? Like you
I just think I was on operational mode in the sense that your headspace is in delivering the poems, making sure you're you know, emphasizing every word, saying what you need to say, doing what you need to do. So it wasn't until kind of afterwards that it slowly started to sink in. And obviously after BYOB posted the video online, that's when I think when things went a little bit crazy for me anyway. But yeah, I think sometimes if you set out with the intention to have this reaction, it doesn't always work that way. And I don't write in that way anyway. I write because, you know, I have something to say, or I just think this will be kind of a fun concept to do. But no, I don't, you know, didn't write the poem or perform it in a way that I thought, yeah, the crowd is going to lose it and it's going to be so much fun to watch. But, you know, I was very lucky that it was very well received. So yeah.
What would be some advice or words of encouragement you'd give to any kind of artist or creative, not even a poet or a writer, anyone who's starting out or has that kind of desire, but maybe they're just stalling a little bit, might be that kind of, you know, like fear can be quite paralyzing. What would you say to sort of motivate them to just get past that and to get started with whatever it is that they would like to do and hopefully share with the rest of the world?
I think I'm just going to give some tips and advice of stuff that I do, which I think is really, really practical. Reading a lot. I think, like, for me, reading lots can help me better understand how to write better. I see things that I like, techniques, that kind of thing. But also kind of exploring arts that are outside of your own thing. So if you're not, like, for example, I'm a big lover of music. I would deviate to other things, watching loads of films, art galleries, that kind of thing. Just something that's still artistic, but it's just forcing you to think in a different way. And I think sometimes, or, you know, just listening to podcasts and
like this one.
Yes.
You know,
Please tune into Speakeasy with Haroon and also the
Metaforecast.
The Metaforecast.
Because you're watching and listening to other creatives who have had similar blocks, have been through the same process. But I think the overarching thing is you just have to keep going. Yes, you do have dips in, you know, whatever your creative process is, and it's just the hardest part is to take that first step to motivate yourself to do something. And sometimes having a bigger project or a bigger goal in mind can really help with eliminating those distractions and stuff in between. So just keep going.
Okay, there are some useful gems in there. To close out, what else would you like to say before we close out this podcast? Like, what are you working on right now? What should we be looking forward to in 2023 and beyond that has your fingerprints all over it?
Potentially book 3.
Wow.
Potentially.
I finally got through.
Potentially book 3. What it is or what it will turn out to be, I don't know yet. But it's definitely a work in progress. Lots of kind of stuff in the pipeline, and hopefully it will materialise in the way that I want it to. So,
have you got ideas for a title for book 3?
No.
Okay. Just keeping that one close to the chest.
Okay. So where can everyone find you in terms of social media or places where they can pick up your work?
So I have my Instagram, which is @CGill Poetry. So you'll see all of my.
How's that spelled?
So CGILLPOETRY. at C Gill Poetry on Instagram. So you'll see all of the poems that I've posted, all of the spoken word stuff that I do. There's a link on my bio for the books if you want to buy Impression or For the Moment. Yeah, Instagram is kind of my place where you can find everything on and about me. So yeah. And I'd just like to thank you both for having me today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
It's
Don't you
been
think so?
it's been great.
It's been amazing.